years ago, I was flying home to Chicago, to the O'Hare Airport, and I had parked my car at the parking garage, and I land, and I look in my briefcase, and I can't find my car keys. I'm like, oh, great, I lost my car keys. So I decide to go to the car to see if they're there, and sure enough, I get to the car, and the door's unlocked, and there they are, the keys are in the ignition. Oh, good, okay. But it gets better than that. I got in the car, and I go to start the car, and nothing happens, the battery's dead. I'm like, oh, great, now the battery died. So you call the guy, and 45 minutes later, he trundles along with his jumper cables, and he puts the jumper cables on the car, and I go to start the car, and all the lights come on, so there's power now, but the car still won't start. It's turning over, but it won't start. I'm like, why won't this car start? When I look at the gas gauge, and it's all the way on empty. Do you know why? I left the car running. I kid you not, I was late for my flight, I was on the phone, I come rushing in, park my car in the parking spot, run out of the car, grab my stuff, run off to the airport, and leave my car there running. Now you might think, people often ask, well, why didn't somebody take the car? Right? Because they're all under pressure, and they're all walking by, and they don't see the free car there. Under pressure, we miss things, we make mistakes, we make bad decisions, and we see that in organizations today. Under pressure, sometimes leaders show up in a way that has a negative impact on people. Sometimes they make decisions without all the information. Sometimes they miss an important connection in a key relationship. And I want to share an example of a time when a leader actually handled that kind of pressure incredibly well and the positive impact it had. So we work with Northern Trust, large global investment firm based right here in Chicago. Rick Waddell is the CEO. For the book, we interviewed Andrew Stevens, who was the Vice President of Business Development. And Andrew tells a story back again in late 2008. So again, Northern Trust, a financial firm's under a lot of pressure. Rick, the CEO, is in a film studio that's on premises, and he's filming a segment to assure the investors about their business. Now, as Rick comes out of the film studio, he's running late for his next meeting. Andrew's walking down the hallway. Now, Andrew would tell you, at the time, he didn't know how well Rick knew him because, he'd been to some leadership meetings like this and kind of met him a few times, but didn't know if Rick would even stop. Well, Rick did stop. So Andrew said to Rick, hey, Rick, how did the film session go? When Rick, the CEO, said, well, it went really well, and then Rick stopped. And Andrew tells this story like it happened yesterday. He said, that's when Rick said, but Andrew, none of that matters. I want to know how your trip home last week to London was for the death of your goddaughter. Andrew was amazed that Rick not only knew about what he'd done, or what had happened, he had the presence of mind in that moment of pressure. Rick had every right just to walk right by him, to stop and connect. They talked for a few minutes. Rick goes off to his meeting, and Andrew was left feeling like, wow, I matter. I'm valued here. He would go to the wall for Rick. He would do anything in that point. And he still today feels that way about it. We see a lot of this in organizations again today. We see people under pressure with too much to do, with big change efforts going on, feeling under pressure, feeling, rushing, and we miss things. I miss cars running, but I also am at risk of missing things. So I'll ask you, what kind of leader are you? Can you be that kind of leader that under pressure can be able to have that presence of mind to connect, to get all the information, to listen? Because if you do, that becomes a competitive advantage for you, for this team, for this organization, and quite honestly, it can make a huge difference in your personal lives. I know I'm a better husband and father because I'm working on this. I'm working on how I show up under pressure. Why is this hard? Why is it that sometimes smart people fail? Why don't? You probably all have met people either here at NASA or you've met people that you went to college with who were just super bright. I know a few, and you thought, they're going to be the next, leader of the command control center or whatever it is, and they don't do that well. An inability to manage change. Now, I know you don't have much change going on here at NASA, do you? No, you've got an incredible amount of change. By the way, in terms of the impact of change, I love the story of the astronauts who don't like the badge situation. I mean, these are individuals who can handle an incredible amount of pressure, who have been through some of the most challenging, uncertain, times in their lives, yet a new badge system throws them off. You see how change affects us? Isn't it just amazing? A year and a half ago, when the book had just been launched and this program was brand new, I was given the opportunity to deliver this to 100 US Marines. Now, I'm not a military guy, so I would be nervous delivering the emotional intelligence program that I've delivered many hundreds of times, but to deliver a brand new program that I'd never done before to 100 US Marines, I was the most anxious and nervous I've been in a long time. I always remember driving over to Fort Sheridan, just north of Chicago here, and just feeling so anxious. And the funny thing is, the first thought I had was, I should probably use some of the insights and strategies I'm about to teach. Right? I hadn't internalized them yet. So what exactly is confidence? Because it's often misunderstood. It's often thought of as arrogance or overconfidence. True confidence is simply a belief in ourselves and our ability to perform a specific task or reach a goal or achieve an outcome. So as I'm driving over to the program with the US Marines, I was telling myself, I'm not good enough. I don't have a military background. I was actually succumbing to the I have to overperform or do something I'm not capable of, but I was also not feeling like I'm good enough to do this. And here's what's interesting, is confidence is a neurological phenomenon. It's not something you're either born with, you have, or you don't have. It has to do with a balance of two chemicals in our brain. One is testosterone, and speaking of something that's very misunderstood, we're not talking about male aggression hormone. We're talking about the parts of testosterone that are actually quite positive, that give us belief in ourselves, that give us confidence. So in any situation, particularly a pressure moment or situation, we want to have elevated levels of testosterone and confidence and low levels of cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. That's the one that makes us feel panicky and nervous and anxious. If the reverse happens and we have higher levels of cortisol and lower levels of testosterone, then we come across as less confident, more anxious. I mean, Kim in that moment would have had incredibly low levels of testosterone and very high levels of cortisol. All right, that's interesting, but what do you do about it? Can you affect the levels of cortisol and testosterone in your brain? Well, here's the good news, is you can. In the last couple of years, there's been some really amazing research done by Amy Cuddy at Harvard University. And they looked at the effect of body posture on confidence and the balance of testosterone and cortisol. And Amy Cuddy talks about this idea of being open and expansive versus closed and contracted. Here's a really interesting research study. They took test subjects, did the cheek swabbing, and they had each test subject go into a room where the test subject would take a test on a computer screen. And the test on the screen was irrelevant. What they were measuring is they would close the door, and they were measuring to see how long would it take that person to get up, come out of the room, and say, "You forgot about me." You gotta love these research studies, right? All right, here was the main difference. A third of the group did the test on a large iMac screen. A third of the group did it on a medium-sized iPad screen. The third of the group did it on a very small iPhone screen. Which of the groups do you think got up first, had the confidence to get up and say, "Hey, you forgot about me"? The group on the iMac screen, because they were forced into a more open and expansive feeling. The group that did it on the iPad took twice as long as the group that did it on the iMac screen to get up. The group that did it on the iPhone, they had to put a floor on the experiment because they would literally sit there and not get up. They were just stuck there. Low testosterone levels, not sure, what should I do, am I supposed to get up? High cortisol levels, very anxious, literally stuck there. They'd have to literally knock on the door and say, "It's okay, you can come out now."